Dead game. If you know, you already know. I was recently streaming Payday 2 on my channel here, together with a bunch of my friends, and had a good laugh or two. But in all of that kerfuffle, it was probably super noticeable that most of us simply couldn't really bring themselves to properly get invested in the mess that this game has become anymore. But, in the same breath, it should also be super noticeable that there's more than enough people who would call us insane because of that. This is not about that. Instead, it's about the one thing that was always bouncing around in my head the entire time while I was streaming the game. One phrase that you'll definitely have seen if you ever looked at any conversation related to Payday 2 in the last 5 years. Is it a dead game? Discussions between Payday 3 enjoyers and Payday 2 diehards usually went one of two ways. Either there was constant shit-flinging with both sides having valid criticism, or both sides just said that the other side is playing a dead game. Dead game in this case is a relic of a time gone by, whereas people have been calling Payday 2 a dead game since at least 2016. Why? Your guess is as good as mine. I believe that it's in part due to the fact that people have become incredibly annoyed and disgruntled by the antics of Starbreeze, but in reality, it's probably just Steam points farming at this point. Saying dead game under a Payday post will reward you with a near constant flow of Jester awards. Jester awards reward you with points. Points in return can be used for profile decorations, emotes, all the goodies. This is why you'll see so many "we need more LGBTQ+ content in this game" type posts. They're blatant rage bait, abusing the loudest and most toxic people to get mad at them. But then, one fateful day, Payday 3 released, and we were forced to come to terms with the fact that, while the initial release seemed promising in terms of attention, the general audience just had already moved on and didn't really see a reason to stick around, especially when there were better PvE offerings available now. And so Payday 3 was left to rot, with around 900 players remaining in the game. That's not a lot, especially for a live service game. What about Payday 2? Well, that was sitting at 10 to 20,000 players, a solid performance for a game of its age. But something's not right here. And no one seems to really be talking about it. Every video mentioning Payday 2 just ignores it entirely. The player count for this game is fake. Hear me out, and I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Let's take a trip down memory lane and look at the average player counts of some of the standout months in Payday history over the last 10 years. Roughly the end of the golden era, tying it into the revival and the modern Slop arc. March 2015. A 207% increase in player numbers over the previous month. 27,000 players. Fast forward into May of the same year, I turned 15. 8,000 players. Oof. But surely there were a ton of console players who were playing. August of 2015. 16.5 thousand, followed by May of 2016, another low of around 7,000. The full acquisition of Starbreeze from the previous license holder. A huge milestone, one that was then followed by double the player count just the next month, 14,000. Forward to March 2017 again, 7,000 players. But then, a few months later, June of 2017, 80,000 players. An increase of almost 802% over the previous month. Another wave of free copies, and this time with a much bigger audience overall. A much bigger spike in players. How nice of them. This would give Payday 2 the steam for just about the next good year, until the start of 2019, where the numbers went roughly back down to 10,000, about the high average where we left off of in early 2017. This is now the post-Raid World War II, post-Overkill's The Walking Dead world. We've seen the atrocities committed by Overkill turned Starbreeze, and a good chunk of the audience was burned by the amount of issues and poor game design decisions that had piled up. Radio silence on the Payday 2 front made the player numbers stagnate heavily, until November, and the release of the Border Crossing heist, and thus a revival of the game, so to speak, with the Silk Road chapter. Now, if you're around for that, you should tell me what you think about this revival in the comments. I remember that I felt iffy about the future content to come, because at the time I was already familiar with the fact that pretty much no one left working at Starbreeze had any idea of how to properly utilize their tools used for Payday 2. But boy oh boy, I didn't know how bad it really was. Anyway, with the revival of the game and good PR from longtime fans, the player numbers overall shot back up to a record high of 28,000. Dropping back down to 18,000 in February of the next year, 2020, before hitting another peak in May of that same year, at 35,000. This would be just about the highest point, while it fluctuated around the low 30,000, before hitting another high in January of 2023. January 2023 was a teaser trailer announcement for Payday 3, which in turn was another big PR boost for the game, landing it at a healthy 38,000 peak average players. Going from January and the teaser trailer into September, the release of Payday 3, we can see that about 10 to 13,000 had dropped off. Fast forward, a year of trials and tribulation, the game hit another low peak of 27,000 average players in December of 2024. Which obviously doesn't mean that all the disgruntled Payday 3 players hopped onto Payday 2 instead, because once we look at the bigger picture, we'll see that the common trend in pushing the player numbers was more down to Steam sales putting the game out there for less than $1. We have finally reached the Year of our Lord 2025, going from 25,000 in January into 10,000 in February, back up to a whopping 27,000 average players in June, making it the recent highest average player peak that Payday 2 had seen. I think it's safe to assume that this game is far from dead. Is it making money though? That's a different question, but given how many DLC this game has, and how quickly you'll be forced to pay $1 or $2 if you want to try some of the more fun content, it's safe to assume that it might make a buck or two. This would bring us to the here and now, October of 2025. We have a subscription service, giving you access to all non-licensed DLC content in Payday 2, for the price of a measly $5 per month. Let's take a look at the pricing. The Infamous Collection costs $122.88. The Legacy Collection costs $35.88. And the base game only costs $10. Someone new trying Payday 2 for the first time, either picking up from a sale or just by having gotten it years ago for free, they're gonna look at all this DLC content and think to themselves, I really want to play around with it, but I don't know what I need to buy to get the most out of my money, or if I'm even going to be playing the game in a month or half a year's time. The move from Starbreeze here was to entice those players specifically to purchase a subscription, in order to let them play around with the DLC content first and get them hooked so that they might end up buying the DLC on sale, or to at least get those $4.99 out of them before they eventually give up on the game and move on. Money spent is money made. For how controversial this move was, especially with the supposed alleged accidental pricing changes across the collections, I can't say that this is a stupid move. It was a total PR disaster, one that they will definitely have noticed, but also one that they will once again move on from, while most content creators will break their mouths over how scummy and bad Starbreeze are, before those same content creators find themselves unable to break out of the Payday content bubble, and treat almost every content drop as another gift from God in a time of need. Over-exaggeration, but you know what I mean. When I say that Payday 2's player numbers are fake, I don't entirely mean that they're heavily boosted by skin idlers, which are absolutely a thing, but don't make up over 10,000 concurrent players every month, especially with this skin economy. What I mean is that, with how easy it is to run this game on low-end hardware in 2025, helped by tons of performance boosting mods, how often the game was given out for free, and how cheap it really gets sometimes, it's a given that a game with over 10 years worth of content would have a consistent player base, as well as a new wave every sale or two, no matter how poor quality some of the content of this package had gone towards the end. While my mind isn't going to change about Payday 2 in regards to how I feel towards it, I can't deny that it has its pull. It has its strengths, it has its weaknesses, and by God does it have many of them. But it's just such an enticing package, one that I can't blame people for spending time, and by extension money on. After all, I've done just that ever since I turned 14, which is honestly quite sad. And anyway, dead game, leave a like, leave a subscription if you enjoyed my ramblings this time around, And most importantly, I hope you're taking care of yourself.